about stories. Okay, we can speak about, for example, the human person, especially in terms of stories. Okay, the narrative ethical approach, we are going to give a general background. Okay, problems being addressed, proponents and influences, and the main contentions, and then eventually, how do we assess this and critique this? Okay, when you talk about the narrative background, why did it emerge in ethical discourse? Uh, why was it developed in such a way that it became very influential among ethicists? No, for example, Alistair McIntyre is well known for his narrative ethics. Martha Nussbaum, Howard Was, and many others actually propounded on narrative ethics, precisely because they were reacting to a situation during this particular time uh, as a reaction against uh, what happened to moral theology. Because what happened to moral theology, we explained, was has become very casuistic and very moralist, no? So for them to be able to capture something that would inspire us. Moral theology is not about just, talking about cases, but it's about being inspired. But it's about, taking on from a narrative of life and to be able to reshape our own narrative. But I hope when you watch the film and you got touched, actually this impacts more to what compared to what we could learn to be able to make a better life of who we are as a human person. Okay? Because ethics has been very much appreciated from the perspective of uh, modernity, which actually, in a way, atomized the human subject. Apart from his specific context, narratives are always very much appreciated, always within the particular context. You cannot have a beautiful narrative if the person is taken out of that, and you begin to atomize the human person and the human subject. So it's a reaction against that. Especially ethics has become very abstract, very detached, calculative, casuistic. It's devoid of life and inspiration. So therefore, there is a need for greater moral imagination, which can only be drawn out from our way of appreciating the unfolding of stories, how it happened in the past, how it actually become dynamically present, and how what direction it takes in its pursuit of the future, all this happening through moral imagination. Okay. So the solution actually is proposed by the proponents, the post-liberal ethicists and theologians. In the article that you read, that I wrote, actually, you have a description of the post-liberal ethicists like Hans Frey, getting back to the Bible as the narrative, the story. Okay? Also Howard Was, also George Lindbeck, the cultural linguistic tradition, are all attempts of the post-liberals to be able to bring back ethics in the rich, imaginative, narrative terrain of our life, no? Because that's where life is supposed to flourish. Okay? Okay. But there were also those we will see that the liberal ethicists, actually, and theologians, okay, also put forward the need for narratives, for stories. And then you will have here, for example, Paul Ricoeur. You remember our discussion on Paul Ricoeur, okay? The prefiguration, configuration, and reconfiguration of our narratives. That becomes a business in ethics, to be able to for us to renew and even allow transformation of our lives. And then you have, of course, Martha Nussbaum, okay, who would speak about the importance of stories that can shape our imagination, that can sharpen our vision, etc. We will see that. Okay. So According to the post-liberal especially, they talk about human life as a story. My story should be lived within the story of my community, and then my community story should be appreciated within the story of the bigger tradition we call Christian biblical narratives. Okay? And when I want to expound on that, you've read on that earlier. Okay? Assessment. Actually, Martha Nussbaum, I did not include it here, but Martha Nussbaum, the liberals also speak about the narratives. Okay? Uh, but they talk about the stories. For example, not only the Bible, but also novels that actually help us to develop uh, a more uh, rational emotion, okay, a clearer vision of reality, okay, a very keen sense of perception. Pagka nagbabasa ka ng novels, you develop a keen sense of perception. Because what you can appreciate about the novelist is that they have that, they can paint that, no? To be able to trigger our imagination without even having to be there, but you can almost immediately see the reality in the specific context because the novelist is able to paint that. Have you read the novel The Name of the Rose? Okay, written by a very famous literary critic, Umberto Eco. Okay, he is a very well talked about literary theorist and novelist. You know, in The Name of the Rose, it's about a life in the monastery. Okay, about the life of the monks. You know, it has also its own very, very important, what is this? Plot. But you know, he went to that place, to that monastery, only for a day. He stayed there for a day. But after staying there for a day, his perception was such that he was able to write a whole novel very much true to the very specific context, okay, and reality of that community and of every space in that community, okay, that he describes in the novel. In a way, showing that novelists and readers of novels eventually could develop such kind of perception. Okay. The problem here, though, in narrative assessment is the tendency to become traditionalist and conservative. Because, especially in the way the post-liberals would put forward narrative ethics, especially understanding our narrative, personal narratives within the context of the narrative of the community, and the community appreciated within the context of the biblical narrative, interpretation of such narrative would always come in. And generally, sometimes, or generally, such interpretation has always been marked by a particular traditional way of looking at reality. And they speak of tradition, particularly if your narrative and the narrative of your community has to fit in to the narrative of the salvation history, especially, or to the Christian tradition per se, the next question that one needs to ask is, can we really speak of a unity of tradition and of that story? Isn't it that within the tradition, there are multi-narratives that one can actually discover? And sometimes it is just that one particular narrative prevails over the other, and therefore it has to be able to take a look at the reality of the power dynamics present within any particular ethical discourse that is seemingly making a claim to narratives. Okay, so the power dynamics, there will always be forms of exclusion there. Okay, this is what I was saying earlier about Martin Nussbaum. Okay, that is the critique to the post-liberal conservative tendencies. But according to Martin Nussbaum, we can say that literature is very, very important as well for the formation of character. That is also a narrative approach. It develops and makes our perception keen, our imagination more open and more exploratory, our emotion becoming more rational, and our reasoning more, in a way, contextual, and our vision more wide or wider in that sense. So when you read literature, okay, I think, according to Martha Nussbaum, uh, it actually develops particularly our character as human persons. Kaya sabi niya, yung mga novel readers, especially of the socio-political type, actually you would see that they would generally, of course, you would have exceptions, generally would be people who would have more pronounced sense of these different dimensions of the human person in the way we look, relate with reality, with experiences, and with other human beings. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Personalist ethical approach is actually formed, okay, of a liberal approach that the second approach that we would have. General background problems address uh, proponents' influences, main contention. We will also see briefly on this. What time is it? Okay, we have only 10 minutes left. The main proponents, Bernard Herring at the Alfonsianum, Joseph Fuchs at the Gregorian University in Rome, and this is what we were saying earlier, Louis Janssens of the Catholic University of Leuven. Okay. What are they trying to put forward? Okay. They are trying to put forward in within this particular liberal and personalist approach is the whole idea, the two main ideas that they're putting forward is first that the human person actually is a person appreciated, okay, theologically, anthropologically, as having been made, created, and fashioned according to the image of God. And that human person's fundamental dignity rests on that fact. That is a part of this whole liberal personalist approach. Okay, and then second, okay, the human person is adequately considered because the human person has such a dignity that you cannot just brush it aside. But you have to be able to consider the human person in the totality of his reality within the specific context he lives his life. Okay. And when you do that, especially in moral evaluation, you actually do, okay, consideration, adequate consideration of the human person. Let's talk first about the first one. Person of the image of God. God is still the ultimate center of value because the human person's dignity is appreciated precisely on the basis of that reality that we all believe that he has been created according to the image and likeness of God. The statement is first theological statement before it is an anthropological one. Okay. The human dignity depends not on human achievements, but on divine love and purpose. Okay? So you're not more dignified because you have actually become richer, become more powerful, become more famous, or become more educated. No, your dignity does not rest on that. Your dignity rests on the fact that you are loved and God has a purpose for you as you have been fashioned according to his image and likeness. Sometimes the way we live our lives, we look at people always on the basis of certain hierarchies, depending on class, color, race, age, okay, ability, work, etc. But the point is, our human dignity does not rest on all of them, but on the fact that we are created according to God's image and likeness. Minsan, di ba, pag kami nasa gasaan, di ba? Somebody, for example, got hit by the car and dies. And then when you look at the person, minsan maririnig mo, sayang, ang ganda pa man din. Parang sinasabi mo, Dahil kung pangit, pwede na masagasaan. Di ba? Parang yung dignity noon ay nakabatay doon sa kanyang external beauty. O kaya, uy, nagka-cancer, sayang. May PhD pa man din. Parang you attribute greater value to the person on the basis of such hierarchies that we talked about. Okay, when we speak of the God that we believe in, we know that God that we believe in is not an individual God. Okay, we believe in one God, but that God that we believe in, we believe as having three persons. So the one that the God we believe in is actually a community of persons. So it is not an individual God, but a community. And that therefore, if we are fashioned according to the image and likeness of God, we cannot also but be able to be born, grow, and mature within the context of a community of people, especially in love, in spite of our differences, just like in the triune God. And then it talks about uh, person in the image of God is appreciated according to the graciousness of God, the giftedness of humans with each other. Okay? So those are things that are emphasized. Let's move on. In the liberal approach, okay, the human person adequately considered, that's the second point. Uh, the human person is taken as a relational being, okay, as an embodied subject, a historical subject, fundamentally equal, and uniquely original. Okay, as a relational being, okay, against subjects in isolation, we speak of a, a human person always in relationship with himself, with others, and with God. For us Filipinos, especially, this is emphasized on the fact that our own goodness is defined not because we are intelligent, not because we are good or we have abilities, but because we know how to enter into meaningful social relationships. Okay? Our value, the buting Pinoy is very much, sasabihin sa'yo, talino nga yan, di yan mabuting tao. Mabuting tao is the one who actually can relate meaningfully with other human beings. When we speak of the person adequately considered, we speak of the person, the subject, as an embodied subject. Okay? As a subject, this person is looked upon as somebody with autonomy, with a capacity for self-determination, okay, with somebody capable of exercising the freedom of his conscience, okay, and that person is looked upon never as a means, but always as an end. That is what you mean when you say subject. And when that person is embodied, that person who is autonomous, self-determined, free, and having consciences, okay, and having a purpose to pursue in life, that person is also equally embodied. Okay? And our bodiliness, something that has been emphasized by the feminists, actually, uh, our uh, our bodiliness is what enables us to precisely connect with all the rests. Okay, our social dimension becomes only meaningful within the context of our bodily communication. Okay, the way we look, the way we touch, the way we speak, the way we listen, the way we move, all of those communicate the subject to the other person. And at the same time, just as the body becomes an instrument of, of our a lot of possibilities, especially within the context of what we can do and what we can develop in terms of relationship, our bodiliness actually also puts limits and constraints to certain possibilities. Okay, you want to fly, but you cannot because you don't have wings. Okay, you want to stay in water just like the fish, but you can't because you don't have the resources to do that. Of course, for a long, long time, humanity had always wanted to solve that problem. For example, in the Greek mythology, okay, Icarus wanted to develop and make himself fly and soar up high. He did, but when he was approaching the sun, all the wax melt, and then he fell. And now, of course, we fly through the plane, through choppers, etc. And we also are able to dive, so deeply in the sea through submarines, etc. Of course, not accessible to many. But there are ways of overcoming such limits. But at the same time, our own our own constraints as human person is on the basis of our own embodied being. So you can never talk about, for example, pursuit of good apart from the specific locality and context where you find yourself in. Kaya nga, ang discourses ngayon cannot be always universal and abstract, but it is always embodied and contextualized and particular. The subject is also a historical subject, which means that when you look at yourself and also other people, especially doing moral evaluation, as a historical subject, the human person is relentlessly temporal. You're conditioned by time. You have a past, present, and future. All your own structure and ontological structure of your being is always according to your time. Okay? And then also, within this time, we have to respect the phases of particular developments. Okay, that's why we studied anthropological development. We also studied psychological development of human persons, because you cannot take the person apart from his own historicity as a human person. And that's what we saw, for example, in the life of John the 23rd. Okay, his own becoming the Pope with the character that he has had been actually shaped in the course of his past, of the influences that happened in his life, etc. And then also, the whole question of our own contextuality is very much based on the basis of our historicity as human individuals. Fundamentally equal, even if you are all different, okay? We have even twins would have different characters or different specific features, okay? They are or different thumb marks, but we are all the same, somehow fundamentally equal as human persons. Okay, we share a common humanity, which becomes the basis of our fundamental respect of others, even if they are very different from us. Okay, even if they are not Catholics, even if they are not white, even if they are not, for example, if they belong to indigenous communities, all of them share a common humanity, which fundamentally is equal in dignity for everyone. And that becomes the basis for our adequate consideration of the human person. Just as we are uniquely, or just like we were actually fundamentally equal, but we are also at the same time uniquely original. Each person has a distinct condition that one needs to understand and even respect. Okay, not a single one could be a dispensable part of the whole. Everyone becomes important, therefore. Just like what Simple would talk about in the body, we're all different. We have different parts in the body, but each one is so important. And our own importance somehow is recognized when we are allowed to exercise our personal responsibility to be ourselves, to develop our own uniqueness. Kaya dati para kayong mga itik. Lahat, when you go to one place, everybody, they walk like ducks, always together. Or their formation was looked upon like assembly line in factories. You have to be able to produce the same type of people. No, but formation now respects the individual character of every person, your uniqueness, your charism, your own specificity, your own narrative, your own history. Everything is actually, in a way, recognized, and on the basis of which every person is allowed to exercise his personal responsibility to become the best person that he could be. And that is what we mean when we say persons adequately considered. Just finally, I'll just touch a little bit about the liberative ethical approach of the human person. When you have a liberative approach to the human person, what is emphasized is not only the human subject, okay, or the human person, but what is actually emphasized is the other, to which the human person is called to relate meaningfully, respectfully, and responsibly. Okay, and that is what we speak about when we talk about liberative ethical approach. If we're going to take a look at the general background problems related to this, is the problem of dehumanization, poverty, injustices. Non-person are become part of the discourse. For example, in liberationist context, okay, the human persons, humanity has not been looked upon as real persons with dignity, but there are, some of them have been looked upon as non-persons because the kind of suffering and abject condition, poverty that they experience. Okay, so what the liberative proponents actually will include liberation theologians and ethicists Gustavo Gutierrez, Leonardo Boff, and then you have another Enrico de Sel, are prominent thinkers and architect, architects of liberation theology. What do they put forward? To be men and women for others. They are invited they are called uh, to be responsive to the call of the other. The others here in this sense are defined as excluded and marginalized in the way uh, Enrico de Sel would like to put forward this whole concept. Of course, originally, this whole discourse about otherness emerged from a French phenomenologist who actually his roots is from Lithuania, okay, Emmanuel Levinas, okay, but he eventually settled and developed his scholarship in Paris, okay, and he talked about the metaphysics of alterity, okay. He talked about the importance, okay, coming as a victim of the Holocaust in concentration camps. He realized that the human person can lose his face and can be treated like numbers and not human persons anymore. So from such experience, he came up with the reflection and contested the whole philosophical tradition, saying that it has become a process of uh, totalitarian ideologization. That's a very, very technical term, which means that the whole development of ideas in the West, according to Levinas, has been very much based on the I, the autonomous subject, always defining and actually just positioning all the others outside of him or her. Okay? So, ang ginawa niya is he actually inverted the process and said, no, we should not be the one to define. We should not be the one to locate people where they should be. But in fact, we should be the one to be defined. We should be the one to be depositioned. We should be the one to be contested. We should be the one to be held responsible for what happens to the other. Okay? So, but of course, in that discourse, it could be very dangerous that when you look upon the other as other and impose on you such discourse, it could be equally dangerous. For example, Enrico de Sel made mention of the experience of Moctezuma in Latin America among the Aztecs, okay? When Cortes, a Spanish colonizer, came, he was a very big white man. And then Moctezuma, looking at him as another, is an appearance of the divine. And then he presented himself and he bowed himself to him. And then he allowed him to take the throne. And that started the pillage of the whole Aztec civilization. And they stole gold and brought them to Spain through Sevilla. And according to the that should not happen anymore. That when you look at the other should not be looked upon as somebody whom to whom we surrender as somebody who is colonizer, etc. But then we have to define the other as an oppressed other, as an excluded other, as an impoverished and unjustly treated other. And it is on the basis of that we allow the other who is oppressed, excluded, to raise contestation against the self, understood in an individual and in a collective way as within a system. Okay, experience of one's liberation is one's response to the call of the other. According to Levinas, and eventually propounded by Dussel, okay, he says that our experience of liberation happens only when we are able to fully respond to the call of the other to responsibility. Okay, so I would like to end there. Okay, we have can